The process of detoxification is something that the body does naturally. We're coming into contact with things that are, not supportive to our bodies, whether we talk about, like actual toxins in the form of like heavy metals or microplastics or, other things. But sometimes it's even toxins that our body produces as a byproduct of some sort of process internally. And so typically, like let's say we look at like 100,000 years ago, our toxic load in our day-to-day life was a lot lower than it is today. So for example, we have a lot more toxins in our external environment. One massive toxin that I think people don't really understand is like the amount of stress that we have in our day-to-day life, right? So stress in general is going to have massive impact on the entire body, including that natural detoxification process. And so over time, due to all these like inner and external factors, the natural process of detoxification tends to slow down. What I kind of look at with detoxification is essentially just as simple as, we're packaging harmful substances into less harmful ones and then hopefully excreting them out of the body. People think that like we get heavy metals from like very specific things like, the mercury fillings or things like that. But I think what people don't realize is that they're literally everywhere, right? Like tap water has heavy metals. Like if we walk outside and we're breathing air, we're breathing in aluminum. We're consistently poisoning ourselves with these heavy metals. How many of us are, wearing our Lululemons and our Aloe Yoga, sports gear, where every time that we wash that, it releases microplastics. Every time that we sweat, we absorb those microplastics into our skin. So it's kind of like it's everywhere, and it's you have to put a lot of time and effort in to avoid it.
Should we be cognizant of parasites? Do they fall in the same type of vein of negative impact as toxins in our body, or are they two separate things?
This is actually where I think there's a lot of misconception in the space. There's really two schools of thought here, right? Essentially, like our entire Western medicine system is built on the idea of germ theories. It's essentially says that like a parasite, a bacteria, or some sort of external factor is the cause of disease, right? There's another school of thought, and it essentially says that it's not the external thing that's causing the disease or the symptom, but it's the internal, so let's say like the host's conditions of how their body essentially is functioning at the time, whether or not disease is expressed. So parasites essentially, in the same way that when we look at a forest and we like take a scoop of the soil, there's going to be a million microorganisms in the soil, right? And so the health of the soil determines which types of organisms are there. And so the same thing happens with our microbiome or with our body. So that's how I look at parasites. They actually serve a purpose in our bodies by consuming a lot of the excess waste and heavy metals, the same way that you might see parasites on like a decaying animal, or you might see mold on a fruit that's decaying, right? It's actually just helping down and breaking down essentially dead and toxic tissue. When we start to attack parasites directly, we're actually not dealing with the reason why they're there. And this is so often why you see, a lot of these people on Instagram promoting, do this parasite cleanse 2 or 3 times a year, because they're going to come back, right? Because you're not actually dealing with the reason why someone has parasites, but our bodies actually naturally have defense mechanisms to make sure that these parasites don't overgrow. Like our stomach acid is the first thing. However, if we are chronically stressed, if we're mineral depleted, if we have a congested liver, our stomach acid also goes down. And so now we don't have that first line of defense.
And I think for 45, I'm in pretty good shape. I'm in pretty good health. Obviously anything could be better, but I think I'm pretty good. Mm-hmm. I just have so many friends that they just simply don't understand what it feels like to wake up in your mid 40s and feel good, ready to go.
These metals and minerals also have certain qualities. So copper, for example, like we already kind of discussed, like it excites the brain, so it can create more anxiety, essentially. We start to see that these minerals essentially shape our personality, and this is where it gets really interesting, because things like autism, ADHD, like any sort of like what we call, like mental disorders tend to have roots in these mineral imbalances. As a kid, I had learning disabilities, I had eczema, I had like all of these things that you would assume, right? Like how can a kid get such things? Well, it's because, right, we're born into like whatever toxicity or mineral pattern our parents kind of inherit to us. If we think about the gut and the brain connection, right? There's an awesome book that I read, I think it's literally called The Gut-Brain Connection. And it talks about this relationship between our microbes And again, like our brain, our serotonin, right? So about 90% of our serotonin is created in the gut. So if we have imbalances in our gut, if we have, like what I said, right, liver congestion that leads to overgrowth of certain bacteria that has more of these pathogenic bacteria overgrow and not as many of the good bacteria that help create the serotonin, we might feel depression and anxiety. And what happens, right, is like as a child, maybe we're put on antibiotics. It wipes out our gut microbiome. Now we get anxiety and depression. Zach Bush does a lot of research on this as well, how I think it was like one course of antibiotics can increase our risk of major depression by like 40%. You know, when we look at like meditation or like working with like our mind as a way to heal ourselves, it also goes both ways. Like we can do things with our minds that actually end up signaling things to the body that it can heal. And it's this bi-directional relationship that if we understand that, you know, we would optimize our bodies, I believe, more so that we can really alter our brain chemistry and the way that we see the world and look at the world. We can become more positive and therefore, you know, do better in our job, do better with our finances and our relationships. And the other way around as well, like we'd probably spent more time like really working on improving our mental focus, on meditation, on all these things that we know improve the physical body and our energy as well.